Good Friday morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to yet another weekly Friday edition of the Alan Fitz podcast, also known as The Chat. Good morning to everyone out there. My name is Alan Fitz, and I am the host for the program this morning, and welcome into the show. Folks, we're doing the chat a little bit different this morning. For the very first time, we are actually live on YouTube this morning. And of course, during the live broadcast here on the chat, it is being recorded. So not everybody is listening to the chat this time of the morning. So we always record it after the live broadcast here on the YouTube channel, where folks can listen to it just whenever they want to. And for the very first time as well, we are outside our studios this morning. And you may hear a little bit of traffic noise in the background. Our studios are located right off of Interstate 40 here in Amarillo. And you also may hear some tree crickets, what we used to call them as well. It's very unusually cool this time of the morning, so I decided to get outside, pull up a chair, and do the podcast. And as always, as we start the show, we want to welcome in our three main listening audiences this morning. Number one, those that do agree with everything that we do talk about. We greatly appreciate these people. They spread the news for us, family, friends, social media. The number two listening audience that we have, well, folks, they don't quite agree with everything that we say, but they are smart enough, as we always said, to leave positive criticism. We do know where your pages are out there. We do appreciate the positive criticism, and yes, we do listen to you. And we always try to make things a little bit better to get you up from number two to number one. And then, of course, the people that inspire the chat. And folks, we all know who I'm talking about. I don't have the time to go into who they are, but it's the haters out there. They can't see the forest for the trees. It really doesn't matter what you talk about on the chat. They're going to find something negative about it. We could care less, because there's really nothing they can do. They can't control the broadcast. They can't control anything. They're just miserable people out there. But thank the haters out there once again for tuning in, because we know you're listening. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, let me say this about the haters right quick, and then we'll get on to the podcast subject. The haters always tune in because they are so afraid that we're going to say something about them in a negative way. So they make sure that they tune in. And we're not going to talk about them anyway. There's nothing to talk about, actually. But anyway, we want to welcome them into the show as well, and welcome all of you listeners this morning to the Alan Fitz podcast. Folks, I'm going to get a little bit different this morning as far as the subject on the show, because, and this podcast, actually, I had planned on doing it roughly about a month from this morning, but I got to thinking, you know what, maybe we need to get this out here. And because, school has just started. It started a couple of days ago here in the Amarillo area. And it's just something I need to talk about. And I forgot to say, if I did say it, I don't remember it. But if I didn't say it, welcome into the show live from outside our studios here in Amarillo, Texas. Folks, I've talked about on several occasions, several of the podcasts, that we live in a different generation of time. And yes, we do. A lot of you, I know, agree with that, but there's also a lot of you out there that probably don't agree with it. So I want to try to set the record a little bit straight on when I'm talking about a different generation of time, and where we're going with this morning is the stupidity of people. Okay, and I want to kind of get into this, kind of ease into it, if you will, and then get into the dead heart of the matter with it, because it's something that it's becoming, it seems like, impossible in everyday life to deal with. And it truly is the stupidity of some people. Now, you baby boomers out there, I always talk about the baby boomers here on the podcast. A lot of you will side with me on this. You will totally agree with me on this. But we don't live in time that we used to live in, say, 50 years ago. And I'm going to get into why we have so much stupidity in today's time from so many people. Again, you baby boomers will remember, back in the late 1960s, all through the 70s, especially the 1970s, because, this is the best time when music came out. You had the Bee Gees, you had the Eagles, you had you name it, it was the best music of all time back in that time generation. And respect, and don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, respect has always been earned. It's never been given to anyone out there. But respect has always been earned, and respect was earned a little bit easier than it is in today's society, and I'm going to explain to you why. First of all, you have to remember that people back in the 1970s were more laid back than people are now. And one of the reasons, and some of you may or may not agree with this, and that's okay if you disagree, is the population explosion that we've had today is not the same as we had 50 years ago. Life was pretty simple back then. And for you newcomers out there, this new generation of time, you're not going to understand any of this. But we're going to get around to you in this podcast as well. But back in the 1970s, you could remember it was more laid back, and parents disciplined their children differently than what they do today. Now, let me give you a classic example of how it was different 50 years ago. First of all, kids respected their parents, and the laws here in Texas were a little bit more laid back than they currently are today. And what I mean by that is, and we're gonna really get into this as this podcast moves forward this morning. But you had kids back in that time era that basically knew to say yes ma'am and no ma'am, and respected their parents and everything else that went on. If, let's say for an example, you were at the grocery store and you had maybe you were a 4th grade child, that put you around 10 years old, whatever the case may be, and you had maybe you were shopping at a local convenience store, or maybe I think Walmarts were first beginning to come in back in that time era. Maybe the parents, you were in there with your mom and dad, or maybe just your mother. Especially the girls, they went with their mother, where the boys went with their daddy. and they maybe wanted something extra. Uh, maybe a candy bar, maybe a Coke, maybe an icy, whatever the case may be, because ices, if you remember, were very popular back in that time era. And let's say that somebody was tugging on somebody's shirt and they wanted something extra, and the mother said no. Well, that was the end of it. You respected that. You didn't argue with your parents, unlike what they do today. And again, we're going to get into this new generation of time as time goes on. But you had respect back in that time era, unlike what you have today. And I'm going to get a little bit more into it and explain why the disciplinary problems occur more today and why it cannot be handled like it was back in the 1970s. Now, one of the things that you had, and again, you baby boomers will remember this, one of the things that you had was daddy wouldn't put up with a whole lot of foolishness. Now, your mamas might let you slide on some of it, but your daddies wouldn't let you slide on it, okay? You hoped your mama got a hold of you first to correct the problem, and then daddy wouldn't have to deal with you. Folks, where I'm going with this is, and I'm going to go ahead and fast forward and jump it to today's society and explain to you why that it cannot be handled today like it was 50 years ago. We did some extensive investigating here on the Alan Fitz podcast. And we actually talked to several people that really didn't know the answer either until we ran across one certain individual. And this individual actually, and I'm not going to call his name because, I want to protect his identity. I don't want to get him into any kind of problem because technically he wasn't supposed to speak with us because, we're in the media. We're the press. You're supposed to go through the PIO, and that's the Public Information Office, or the officer rather, of the Amarillo Police Department. But we did have the opportunity to speak with an Amarillo police officer. And we actually sat down with him. And he told me that a lot of the problems that we're seeing here in today's society is a result of the Texas Penal Code. And where I want to get into this is where they cannot do their job the way it should be doing today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves only to blame for this. And this is where the stupidity of people come into this topic on this podcast on this Sunrise Friday morning. You go back to the 1970s, and let's say that you were a child or something, and I'm sure a lot of you probably had this done to you, or you knew somebody that had it done to you, but you smart-mouthed your mother, you smart-mouthed your daddy, and you'd get slapped across the face. Okay, in today's society, they call that child abuse. It wasn't the case back in the 1970s. And folks, I'm going to tell you a true story about me going back into the 1970s. I'll be man enough to step up to the plate and tell you a true little quick story about even myself back in this time era. I remember riding the bus home one afternoon and decided I would smart mouth the school bus driver. Well, the school bus driver basically pulled over on the side of the road and got out of the bus, and he went to a tree. Actually, he went to a little peach tree that was nearby in a ditch along a fence line, and he broke off a peach tree limb, and he got back on the bus and grabbed a hold of me by the collar of the shirt, dragged me off the school bus, and wore me out with it. Folks, you can't do that anymore in today's society. That's considered abuse. And that goes back where I was telling you earlier on this podcast that the laws are a lot different back then than they are now in today's society. And this is where the stupidity of people come in. How many of you out there remember that there wasn't any such thing as a cell phone? No one ever heard the word internet. All we knew to communicate was, well, a rotary dial telephone, if you will, unless you put two tin cans together, drilled a hole in them, and then tied a string to them. That's how simple it was. You got off the school bus and you went home and you did your homework before you were allowed to go out and play, so to speak. You had to do your homework. It was first priority with mama and daddy. It was a simple life back then. Not so simple today in today's society. And this is where the changes have come in life over the last 50 years, folks. Now, we live in a society where you have cell phones, and it just doesn't seem like people can stay off of their cell phone. I mean, now, I'm going to be the first to admit, I have a cell phone too. As a matter of fact, I carry two of them. One for work and one for personal business. But constantly, you are seeing people on cell phones. You're seeing people pull up to red lights, and the light turns green. They don't move. It's because they're too busy texting on a phone. They have things now that we didn't have back then because we'd never heard of it. It hadn't been invented yet. Sure, a lot of you probably remember getting up early in the morning and watching Captain Kangaroo on TV. Bob Keeshan, Mr. Green Jeans, Bunny Rabbit, Mr. Moose, that big, I can't remember, grandfather clock, I think they called it. I'm just remembering this off the top of my head right now. And it was simple back then. Your kids could go out and get on a bicycle and ride around in the neighborhood, and you didn't have to worry so much about, like in today's society, where you might have a child predator running loose somewhere, wanting to kidnap your child or take them off somewhere and kill them. You didn't have that concern back then like you do now. But in today's society, ladies and gentlemen, it's the stupidity of people that is the problem in today's society. And I'm going to explain to you why this is happening. A lot of parents out there, I don't know what state you're in listening to this podcast, but we're specifically talking about Texas. A lot of parents out there have the misinformation, if you will, that your child goes out and does something stupid or irrational, if you will, that you don't have the power to punish or discipline your children, when in fact, yes, you do. And this is a big misconception in today's society of why children act the way they do. Give you a classic example. Let's back it up 50 years ago, back to the baby boomer times. And then we'll compare it to today's time here in 2026. 50 years ago, let's say that, and I remember back in these days, you could get a driver's license at 15 years of age. Okay, most people had to wait till they were 16. I was lucky enough to get mine at 15. But I'm going to use a scenario here with you this morning to give you a classic example of what would have happened back in those days compared to today's society, in today's rule, if you will. Let's say, for an example, you had just got your driver's license and you decided to go up into the middle of town and show off in front of your friends, in front of your peers, and decided to maybe do a burnout or maybe cut some donuts under the red light in your local town. Say that the police pulled you over, and yeah, the police knew who your parents were. It was a small town. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew the three S's. Yada yada, so forth and so on. Yeah, your daddy would get a telephone call on it. And your daddy would wear your ass out. And yeah, your daddy could get away with it. Let's say that you backtalked your mother over something like this. Your mother would probably slap you in the face. And yes, this is how discipline should have been done. Now, I'm not saying, ladies and gentlemen, that back in that time era that every parent was right doing that, okay? It just depended on how it was administered. You know, there's one thing 50 years ago to slap your child upside the head, kind of like Mark Harmon used to do it with Tony on NCIS. That's one thing, to pop them upside the head. But to draw back and to knock them nearly down and draw blood, that's a different ball game, folks. But irregardless, this is how parents handled disciplinary procedures back 50 years ago in time. Now, we're going to fast forward to today's society. We're going to get into the stupidity of people. Again, you have the misconception out there that you cannot discipline your child. Here in Texas, and we did investigate the current language of the law that is on the books. There is a difference between disciplining your children and abusing your children. So this is where the stupidity of people actually come to be in today's society. A lot of kids out there know that they can go out and do just about what they want to do and pretty much get away with it because they know that mom and daddy cannot discipline them like they did 50 years ago. And how does kids know about this? Well, folks, it's simple. They've probably talked to their grandparents, and their grandparents have told them stories about how things used to be. You've got kids nowadays that just cannot get off their cell phones. Yeah, I've actually seen it here in Amarillo where you'll tap your horn at somebody, and not necessarily an adolescent child, but even adults. They'll roll the window down and shoot the bird at you, okay? And then just floor it and take off. These are the kind of people, ladies and gentlemen, that no matter how many times you approach them, no matter how many times you say they're not going to admit to fault, okay, because in their mind they haven't done anything wrong. People in today's society, and I'm not saying that everybody does this, but it's mainly the younger generation. The new generation came in about the turn of the century in 2000, okay, 26 years ago. I don't know. They just seem to think that it's open air world, if you will, and they just do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it, and there's nothing happening to them in today's society. There is no discipline. There is no coaching. Folks, I hate to admit this, but a lot of them, there's not anything being done. Same case scenarios with even kids riding school buses. I mean, the laws have changed so much, and kids know this, that they can get on a school bus and do just about whatever they want to do. And I'm only using a school bus as an example in this situation. They can get on a school bus and cut up and do whatever they want to. And the school bus drivers know that they can't lay their hands on them. Again, a different scenario 50 years ago where they would drag you off the bus. And even back then, they leave you on the side of the road. Okay, you can't do that now. You know, that's a felony in Texas, and I think it's a felony actually in any state. That is considered abandonment of a child. Okay, so you know, you get yourself in some really hot water doing that very, very quickly. Actually, you have kids nowadays that want a hot rod up and down the road. Here in Amarillo, and I'll give you a classic example, and this is actually a true example of what goes on here. Last several months, and it seems to occur every Friday night and every Saturday night very, very late. And we've done the math on this. We've done the investigative process on this. We've talked to some of the Amarillo police officers here. We've talked to some of the Texas State Highway Patrol officers here, the state troopers. These are kids that are flying down Interstate 40 here in Amarillo in the middle of the night, drag racing each other, if you will. Why do these kids do this? You may ask yourself. Because in reality, it's the stupidity of these people, these individuals that are doing this. It's because they don't have anything else to do. A lot of you may be asking yourself. Or is it because they're not receiving the right kind of raising followed through with discipline, restrictions, if violations occur? I'm going to tell you folks something else that I ran across the other day. I was in one of the local Walmarts here in Amarillo. We have 4 across the city here. And I was in line purchasing, trying to check out my goods in my buggy, the groceries that I had went and got. And all the self-checkout lines were pretty full, but some of the and I like to call them live checkout lines, where you have an actual live checker. There was only like 2 people in line, so I kind of quickly got over there. And in front of me, there was this Hispanic woman. Well, if you hear that in the background, and here it is shortly before 6:30 in the morning, motorcycles racing once again. Anyway, getting back to what I was talking about, And folks, traffic is very, very heavy right now along Interstate 40. So again, there's another, and you heard it live right here through the microphone, the stupidity of people. Getting back to the story that I was talking about, it was a Hispanic woman. She didn't really have that much, actually, in her buggy. And she had this little girl, and I looked down at her. The little girl couldn't have been more than maybe 5, 6, 7 years old at the oldest. And she was tugging on her mother's blue jeans, just below the buttocks, kind of down the leg. And she had a candy bar in her hand, the little girl did. And she kept asking her mother if she could have the candy bar. Her mother had told her, I remember counting at least 3 times, no, put it back. And about the 4th time, the mother actually raised her voice to the little girl and said to put the candy bar back, I'm not going to buy it. Folks, the little girl put the candy bar back in the candy box that it came from, called her a puta. For those of you that do not know Spanish, I will convert that to English to you. The word puta in Spanish means bitch in English. What did the mother do when this child called her own mother, I'm assuming that's who it was, a puta? She just laughed at her. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the wrong thing to do. Laughing at the child because she called you a derogatory name. That is not the way to handle this, because where I'm going with this is a lot of you parents out there are causing the stupidity of your children. Of course, it wasn't the place of me or anyone else to say anything to this Hispanic woman or even her child. But this woman handled this situation incorrectly, laughing at what appeared to be her daughter after her daughter called her a bitch, basically, to her face. Folks, I'm here to tell you 50 years ago, your mama would have slapped you right into stardom inside the store. And it wouldn't have mattered who saw it. The stupidity of people, a lot of this is because of the parents having the misconception that they cannot discipline their children. Laughing at a child after they call a parent something like that, number one, it's unacceptable. Very, very unacceptable. Maybe 50 years ago, but it seems like today it's an acceptable procedure, if you will. You hear a lot of people using profanity just in normal conversation. People dropping the F-bomb. People just blatantly coming out with no regard to anyone standing around. You know, back, folks, when I was growing up, you didn't use profanity, especially around the ladies. Okay? This society today, and again, we're back to the stupidity of people. This society today will say anything regardless of what it is. No matter who's standing around, men, women, children, it doesn't matter. Priests, Baptist preachers, it doesn't matter. They just come out and say what they have to say. And there is no regard for people's feelings. There's no regard for the respect of people or anything. A lot of this, again, is attributed to the parents not raising your children correctly. And if your child is already grown up, well, it's too late. Okay? That time period has passed. It's too late to do anything, actually. And all you can do as a parent is hope that your child or your young adult child will grow up to know the difference between right and wrong. The stupidity of people in this generation, unfortunately, yes, a lot of them know the difference between right and wrong, but a lot of them don't. I'm not saying that every child out there has this problem. I'm not saying that every parent out there raised their children wrong. What I am saying is, the ones of you in this new generation of time that did not raise your children correctly, the best you can do is hope they don't wind up in the penitentiary or dead in the graveyard. And I'm getting into the heart of this thing right now, folks. Yes, you can still discipline your children. Yes, even if your child is 30, 40, 50 years old and they were raised correctly, they're going to still have respect for you and they're still going to listen to you. Now, you may not can get them all to do what you want them to do, but for the most part, yes, you can. The stupidity of people, and it's not, I'm not going to just concentrate right here in Amarillo. It's all over the place, okay? It's everywhere you go. People disregarding speed limit signs. Everybody has to drive 100 miles an hour no matter where they're going. Disregarding school zones, speed limits. Disregarding this, disregarding that. And what's really, really, really a concern in this day's society with the stupidity of people is how many of you out there listening to this podcast right now have ever noticed that if you go into a hospital or even a freestanding clinic, which they didn't even have those back in time, they have them now, they got several of them here across Amarillo. How many have you noticed that police officers and security officers are in bigger numbers than they used to be back in the 1970s? And yes, they had security at hospitals back in those days. But they're really prevalent in today's society, and I'm going to tell you why. It's the stupidity of people. People going into hospitals, people going into freestanding medical clinics and arguing with a doctor, arguing with a nurse. And here's the really strange part about this, of the stupidity of people. A lot of these people, and I'm going to shoot a high number to this, I'm going to say probably about 95% of them, ladies and gentlemen, don't even have any medical training. They don't have any medical degrees. They've never gone to medical school. But yet they go into hospitals and they want to argue with a doctor and raise hell in the emergency room with them, and then they have to get the police involved to quell it down. It's the stupidity of people. Okay? If you don't have a medical degree, if you don't know what you're talking about, why are you in there arguing with a licensed physician, somebody that has gone to college for many, many years and knows way more than you do? It's the stupidity of people, ladies and gentlemen. Other examples I can give you is people, and I was talking about this earlier, sitting at a red light, texting on your phone, the light turns green, you're down there looking at your phone, okay? You're not looking at the light that turned green, and somebody just taps their horn. I'm not saying that they laid down on it for 5, 10, 15 seconds. They just tapped it. And it's a polite tap to alert you that the light is green. Move on through the intersection, you're blocking traffic at that point. The stupidity of people kicks in. So the one that you lightly tapped your horn on, they roll the window down and give you the bird. Okay, they flip you off. It's the stupidity of people. What good did it do to roll the window down and flip off an individual? To people out there that have done that, what did it do for you? Now, some of you may say, well, it gave me satisfaction. Okay, but can you really describe what kind of satisfaction you got? No, you cannot. In reality, what has happened is you showed your stupidity. Okay? You did not receive any satisfaction for flipping the bird off to somebody. It's the stupidity of people. You should have been watching the traffic light turn from red to green and proceeded through, and the person behind you wouldn't have tapped the horn in the first place. So who's at fault? You are. Absolutely. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, they're not going to admit fault. Okay? The stupidity of people, the stupidity itself will never admit fault. They will always blame you for tapping your horn at them. Another example of the stupidity of people is just being rude to people. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that it takes more muscles to smile than it does to frown at someone. You see this everywhere you go, it seems like nowadays. 50 years ago, when Walmart was first coming out, and we all know that everybody that listens to my podcast knows that I don't like to talk about Walmart, but I'll use them as an example in this podcast. You were standing in line waiting to be checked out. And while you were standing in line, you were casually and friendly engaging in conversation with someone, whether you knew the person or not. It was always a friendly encounter. Not so much today, where you have people that may go into Walmart and begin chewing out the cashier behind the counter. Well, what's taking you so long to get this done? Or, and I've actually personally seen this many, many times, where you may have someone that is not as fortunate as you. Maybe using, I believe they call them, some people refer to them as a food stamp card. I don't know exactly what they're called here in Texas. But maybe they're trying to check their groceries out and their card is not working. Whether it be if I'm calling this correctly, a food stamp card, maybe a debit card, maybe a credit card. That card is not working correctly. It keeps denying the transaction on the card. Whatever the case may be, folks, you have the stupidity of the people standing behind this individual that is having some type of difficulty paying for the item. Well, what's taking you so long to do this? Why don't you get out of the way? The line's backed up. People are in a rush here. You're holding things up. You're being a nuisance. That's the stupidity of people. You know, an act of kindness, folks, goes a lot further in life than an act of ugliness. Think about it for a minute. How many of you out there have been ugly to someone? Now, Your podcast host here, Alan Fitz. I'm not a perfect angel either, but I am man enough to step up to the plate and say, I've done that before. How'd you feel about it at the end of the day? Felt kind of rotten, didn't you? But how many of you out there have been really nice to people? And at the end of the day, you've got that warm feeling inside of you that, hey man, everything is going my way. It seems like it's perfect, doesn't it? In fact, yes it does. You're not showing your stupidity. Folks, I'm here to tell you something right now. This is not the 1970s anymore. This is not the 1980s. This is not the 1990s. Those days are over with. We can't get them back. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you can't get the good old days back. The good old days were coming in from school on a Friday afternoon, jumping off the school bus, your weekend has began, watching Dallas on Friday nights, watching the corruption with JR, the late Larry Hagman, getting up on Saturday morning and watching Saturday morning cartoons, maybe calling a friend or two up on the phone, maybe having a friend or two over on Saturday night for a sleepover. I think a lot of the girls used to call them slumber parties out there. There wasn't any stupidity. Now, don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Even back in the 1970s, you still had some people with some stupidity. But there was more respect back in that time era than there was in current present day time. I've seen people show stupidity over a parking space at the local grocery store. One of the wildest encounters that I've experienced here in Amarillo is people fighting over a handicap parking space, getting into a literally heated argument, a verbal disturbance out in the parking lot of Walmart. I saw this first. No, I saw it first. You beat me to it. You're going to move it or else. And here we go. The next thing you know, the police are called in. And why is all of this happening? Folks, it's called the stupidity of people. I know it seems to be, for the younger generation, it seems to be a normal part of life. Okay? This is what you have grew up in, and I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but it's really all you know. You have no idea what it was like back in life 50 years ago, because, well, you hadn't been born yet. All you can do is have somebody tell you about it that lived back in that time era and experienced what life used to be. I remember growing up as a child that my father told me that when he was growing up, they lived in a little house, and we're not talking about poor people, we're not talking about rich people, we're not pinpointing any of that. We're pinpointing life way, way back. I remember my father once telling me that he went to sleep at night, and he got up the next morning and it had snowed overnight, and that snow had frozen his hair to his pillow. They had a crack in the roof, and the snow had seeped in during the night. Sounds like hard times. But actually it wasn't, ladies and gentlemen. This is just the way life used to be. And we're talking about way back in the 40s. I want to throw up something before I end the podcast this morning. And some of you may take offense to this. I think we can all agree that it's not being offensive. But I want to say something. And I want to tell my listeners out there, all of you listeners out there, something this morning. I'm very, very lucky to be at my age in life and still have both of my parents living at the same time. A lot of people that I went to school with, their parents passed away years ago. But one thing I can say, whether these people liked me or not, and whether I liked them or not, I was raised to respect people. I can honestly say that the people that I went to school with, the people that I associated with, the people that I knew in my community, way back then, we all, for the most part, got along with each other. Whether we liked each other or not, whatever the case may be, we all respected each other. And if we had something bad to say, we didn't say it at all. A lot of you baby boomers out there may remember your daddy telling you when you were growing up and your daddy was explaining to you for the first time in your life the birds and the bees. Your daddy also explained to you that if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. If that saying were true, folks, in today's society would not be experiencing the problems that it's experiencing today. It seems like as time goes on in this new generation of time, people have lost respect for others. They don't have any morals about themselves. They don't have any scruples about themselves. And a lot of them have the idea, I'm going to do what I want. If you don't like me, to hell with you. Yes, unfortunately, folks, there are a lot of people like that. How do you handle a situation like that? Well, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a professional podcaster. I'm a radio man. I'm a media man. I'm a press man. From my personal standpoint, you ignore these people. You take care of yourself and you take care of your family before you even attempt to take care of anything else. Yes, the rules have changed in today's society, but for the baby boomers out there, and a lot of you still do, you still live by the old code. And the old code is respect and move forward. As for the new generation of time, the only thing I can say for you is live and let learn. The good always overpowers the bad, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, we do live in today's society of the stupidity of people. but the good will always outweigh the stupidity. And with that being said, that will wrap up this weekly Friday edition of the Alan Fitz Podcast, also known as The Chat. As always, I invite you to go to my webpage, alanfitz.com. That's ALLENFITTS.com. Scroll down and you will learn of the new podcast topics that we are preparing to do in the near future. Always check out that news ticker every morning, each weekday morning around 5 a.m. We do update that ticker. It will have the latest in selected local, panhandle, state, national, world news, and also we have added a feature, Today in History. I want to thank all the listeners this morning for tuning in. It is the first time that we have broadcasted this podcast live on YouTube. I know you've heard a lot of background sounds, a lot of traffic out on Interstate 40, but it was rather cool this morning, and I wanted to attempt it. It looks like we got off without a hitch and no problems. Not any transmission interruptions or anything on the podcast, so that was a good thing. And until next Friday, my friends, and until we meet again next Friday morning at 6 a.m. sunrise, have a great day, a wonderful weekend. This is Alan Fitz saying bye for now.